Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Kaffee and Kuchen with Internationals. I'm your co-host, Anne Lasse, and I'm here today with Rachel Stern. I am going to pass to Rachel now to say a little bit about herself, introduce herself to all of you.
Hi, Anne. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I have been living in Germany for the past 13 years, which I just realized is a third of my life. And that is pretty crazy to me since I intended to only be here for like 9 weeks at first. And since then, I have been living and working in Germany as a journalist and writer, and I've been in Berlin probably 95% of the time that I've been in Germany.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. I find this is the first time that you and I are meeting as well, and so it's going to be very interesting for me to hear your story. I'm going to learn a lot about you, and
Thanks.
I find it interesting. 9 weeks. I feel like so often that's the story. People say, I'm going to come for a certain time frame, and then it extends and it extends. It's such a common scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote a story once about expats who thought that they were going to be here just for a quick amount of time and somehow ended up spending their lives here. It is interesting how that happens. I guess Germany has a pull on you somehow.
Yeah. The same for me. It was 3 years, and now it's coming up 5. So
Wow, you don't
I
know
can
I was
relate.
only 15.
Probably, yeah. Okay, and you're from the US, is that right?
From the US, yeah, right outside San Francisco. And when I first moved here in 2012, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, how can you leave? It's so beautiful there." Nowadays, I hear, "Oh, it's probably good that you left." So times have
Yeah.
changed, but we don't get into politics.
What was the, like, if you go right back to those days when you did make that decision to come to Germany, what was that reason? What brought you here?
I guess I've just always been intrigued by being abroad. I had traveled a bit before then, even though I never really lived abroad, and I just wanted to experience something different for a while. And I had studied Spanish in school, and so I was looking for like an internship or fellowship in a Spanish speaking country, but I couldn't really find anything. And I saw that there were quite a lot being offered in Germany, both for German journalists to come to the States and US journalists to come over here. So I thought, yeah, that's cool, but I don't speak a word of German. But I thought I might as well still apply. And so that was kind of my incentive to start learning German while I was still in California. And then I got this 9 week fellowship and really liked it. So just kept sticking around after that.
Yeah. And are you happy to talk a little bit about that kind of that journey, that 13 years? Because I imagine there's been lots of different phases in the time that you've been here. There's obviously the phase where you first started and you're having to find your way and build your life. And then maybe there's a middle phase, maybe there's another phase. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear.
that's true. There definitely are phases. I think at the beginning, it's kind of that, oh, I'll just stay another year phase, and you don't really see yourself being here indefinitely. And yeah, there was also the phase when I was looking for work, and so I wasn't sure if I would end up coming back. But I think at some point, and I don't know if you've gotten to this stage yet, I just reached the point where it was more comfortable to stay here than to return. And so that's kind of how I kept going. And then I got a full time job here, and then also met my husband and had a child. And after that, it was just, I really started to feel settled. And so now I think if I did move somewhere else, even if I moved back to the States, it would almost feel like being an expat over there again, because you just keep getting more and more comfortable. I don't know if that's something that you can relate to at all.
Yeah, definitely. But I guess I'm at a different phase to you, right?
Yeah.
5 years in, I feel like the first 3 years was a lot of survival and trying to figure out, okay, how do I build a life here?
Yeah.
I think I'm beyond that phase. And now I'm into like I have a life here. I have a network. I've got friends. I kind of know my way around and I can do the everyday things. And I'm still in I guess, the indecision of like year to year, like what is the future? I think going home would still feel comfortable, but I really do like it here.
Glad to hear that. You've been in Hamburg the whole time?
I have, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really true. When you first get here, it's just really hard to figure out the ropes and all of the bureaucracy. I mean, I was lucky that I was part of these organized fellowships where they helped us out a lot with the bureaucracy. And when I came, I had a built-in network of other colleagues. And so it wasn't as though I was completely on my own starting from square one, but it was definitely still a bit tricky. And now I've been here for such a long time, but there are still aspects of bureaucracy that I don't think I'll ever fully understand. And, even when I go home to California, I still feel I have this muscle memory of what to do in every single situation. Whereas here, a lot of things still feel like I'm having to just learn on the go.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm interested in this idea of comfort that you talked about. Do you have a sense of what that means? Like you said, you got to a point where it was more comfortable to stay than it would be to go back. Like how would you define comfort for yourself?
That's a good question. That's something that I never really thought about. I guess it's kind of just knowing what to do, or this feeling of like you don't really have to think about every action or step that you take, that it kind of comes a little bit more naturally to you, and you know the things to say. I mean, it sounds a little bit funny, but I was in London relatively recently and went to order a coffee, and I thought like, okay, I don't know what people say to order a coffee here. It's obviously English, but it's a different style of ordering. And in Berlin, I know exactly the like 10 different ways that somebody would order a coffee, even though it's not my native language. And just the fact that I have that built in and know what to say and do in a lot of situations, I guess it makes it feel like, okay, it's my place. Or even when I travel sometimes and I land back in Germany, I am like, oh, they're speaking my language again, even though German isn't my language. So it's just, I guess, a feeling of being used to things.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like if I think about the way that our brains work, right? It's our brains are built to do things automatically. And when you move to a new place, you can't do anything automatically because you don't know any of it. You have to learn and build new neural pathways in your brain, and that takes time.
Yeah, that's really true. And just the cultural norms of every place is very new to you. Like when we were traveling in Japan last year, it did feel very, very different because even something like, eating, I wasn't sure how people would do it or the right way to address you. I guess it's always like that when you travel. After a while in Germany, I guess it's becoming more natural.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And if you think back to that early days, did you experience culture shock when you arrived? And were there specific things that
Yeah.
you really remember as being surprising?
Yeah, most definitely. I would say just the kind of attitudes of people. Like I come from Northern California, maybe you also have this in New Zealand. And there people are just very friendly. They're always making chit chat. Even if you order a coffee, it's, oh, I love this roast. You should try this one sometime. And so in Berlin, it's very much like, you know, okay, this is what you need to do, and now get out of the way. And people are very straightforward. Being in the U-Bahn, I remember one of my first experiences. This woman stepped on my foot and then criticizing me that my foot was in the way instead of saying sorry. And for me, that was just kind of the only in Berlin incident that you wouldn't find elsewhere. I mean, of course, people are or can be very friendly and helpful, but you kind of have to develop a bit of a thick skin. And I mean, before I moved to New York City, people were telling me, oh, you really need a thick skin. But I feel New York is very soft compared to a lot of the things that I've encountered in Berlin. So I guess there was that aspect of it, and just, also the bureaucracy for everything. I'm so reliant on fax machines, even if you just need to make an appointment. Sometimes I would have to fax in a request and then wait to get a letter in the mail and sign it and fax it back. I mean, it was 13 years ago, but even to this day, I find a lot of Germans are still relying on the fax. and length of using credit card that has been changing, but it's a very cash friendly culture. And I've been living in Silicon Valley where even back then you could kind of just scan an app well once you entered a restaurant to order something. And there back in Germany it just felt very old school the way that everything was done, maybe a little bit slower, which was nice in its own way.
Yeah, I relate to both of those things. I go back to the first point, and it makes me think about my own journey. And at the start, I found the culture shock very difficult because you're right, New Zealand's very, very friendly on the surface as well, and very, I guess, hospitable and welcoming, and kind of go out of your way to help others. And I noticed that as a result, I wasn't very resilient. And the amount of resiliency that I have gained since I moved here is crazy. And I'm so grateful for that, actually. Like, I feel much more empowered and like self-sufficient, I think, as a result.
Yeah, that's amazing. Just knowing that you're able to do these things that you weren't originally able to do or didn't think you could do.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's pros and cons, right, to every way of doing things. And I think to have gained that kind of sense of independence because of the cultural difference has been interesting, and also, like, I think empowering. And you can choose from that point. Either way is okay. And then you get to choose how you want to show up.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great what you said about choosing how you want to show up. It kind of forces you to take charge of the situation. And I don't know if you have experienced this as well, but when I go back to California and talk to anybody there, they never know that I've left. I just, because of my accent, automatically blend in more or less. But when I'm here, now I've been here for 13 years, but even if I was here for 30 years, I would be a foreigner and people would always hear that I have something different and some sort of background. And I actually have to say that I like not being German and having that story because it makes me feel like I have something that I'm bringing. I don't know if you ever get that feeling.
I feel like that's a journey. I'd love to ask you more about that because I think that's challenging. It's really confronting to feel different.
Yeah.
And particularly if you're the sort of person that likes to blend in or be in the background, suddenly when you're in a culture where you are different and you stand out, you can't anymore. This was my experience. And now obviously I've done the work, and I wouldn't say I enjoy it, but I'm okay with it now.
Yeah,
But it's interesting to hear where you're at. Like, you like it. What's going on there in terms of that story? Why do you like it?
that's a good question. I mean, I should preface that by saying that I don't always like it. There are definitely times when I wish I could just open my mouth and fully blend in. And I think here in Berlin, maybe I feel more confident about standing out because everybody kind of stands out and has their own story. But there have been times, I don't know, when we've been in smaller German towns and I know that the second I open my mouth, it's like, who is this person? And that does make me feel more self conscious. Or when I have to deal with some aspect of bureaucracy, I feel like, no matter how well I can speak German, I won't be treated quite the same way because I'm not German. And so that's something that does make me feel more self conscious. But at the same time, I've kind of learned to embrace it, or I guess not feel as shy about it. And especially working as a journalist, when I've had to approach people, that has probably been what has pushed me outside of my shell to think like, okay, I have at least some sort of purpose here where I need to contact this person and I kind of have to own the role that I'm in. But it's definitely been a journey. And I don't know if you feel this way having a child, but it's interesting because I feel like, okay, my child is German and I'm the mother of a German. And that's also another role to embrace that, she, unlike I, is rooted in this culture. And I have to do what I can to like give her this culture while also giving my culture where I come from.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. And I think it brings up like this topic of belonging, right? Like belonging and family, and like creating your own family system maybe, which brings together two cultures. And so I think it brings richness, but also challenges. And so in some ways there's an advantage, I think, through bringing in different perspectives. But there's also a lot of privilege. Like I come from a country where I do look like everybody else on the street, right? And so that's a very different scenario to others that might come from a completely different part of the world and be having a completely different experience. And I have, just through sounding different, have a lot more empathy to the experience of others who feel different or even look different.
Yeah,
I don't know how you feel about that.
that's a very good point. I mean, I was telling you before that in a lot of cases, if I don't open my mouth, then I don't necessarily stand out. But there are people who just going out on the street, they stand out, maybe not in Berlin, but in other parts of Germany. And, you know, for me, from my perspective, it's a blessing to stand out. But I can certainly understand why, sadly, in today's society, that's something that isn't always valued as much as it should be. And, you know, I know, I guess, this experience from like traveling to other areas where not even opening my mouth, I stand out a lot. But here in Germany, I guess, yeah, just as long as, yeah, I guess you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So tell me about your journalism career. And I think you were employed and now you're freelancing. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So I've been freelancing for, I guess, the past year and a half now. Yeah, about the past year and a half. And before that, I was at the local Germany. I'll still do a plug for my former employer because I think it's a useful resource for all expats here. But it's a publication that doesn't just have German news in English, but there's a lot of how-to guides and analysis of what's going on. And I was the editor of that site for about 6 years, and really very much enjoyed it. But especially having a child, I wanted to have a little bit more flexibility. So that's why I switched over to freelancing. The website is called The Local Germany. So it's
Okay.
a publication that is written by expats for expats, and we always try to focus on all corners of Berlin. Hamburg and Munich and Berlin were some of our big focus areas, but really we tried to include anybody that was living in this country, give them relevant news and information. You know, on top of that, I've freelanced for Deutsche Welle as well, and some US publications, a couple German publications like Zeit Online, their English version. Yeah, I just tried to stay open and flexible to whatever comes my way.
It's very different, the life being employed versus the life being freelance. Um, what are like, what do you think the journey's been like? Maybe comparing both a little bit and talk about the pros and cons, maybe the challenges and also the highs.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I did mention the freedom that comes from freelancing, but on the other hand, you get this freedom from being employed because when you're employed, I would appreciate that if I was sick or if my child was sick, then you could take a day off and you would truly be off. And of course, I could do that now, but then it's always that you still have these deadlines. There are always stories that you can't take on, so I think it's forced me to be a little bit more organized. And also, when I work, I'm really working. Like when I was employed, I would kind of take a lot of breaks during the day whenever I could, or like not really be concentrated sometimes just because you had to be at your desk on certain hours. Whereas being a freelancer, like the times when I'm working, that's the really intense focus time. So I think it's just been a different style of working. I'm trying to get things done, but I must say that at least for the time being, I feel that it fits my schedule a bit better, and it's nice. I'm really grateful that I'm able to take on that role right now. Are you a freelancer as well, or? also employed.
I'm also a freelancer, yeah. I am interested. So, what's something that I struggle with in terms of freelancing is, I mean, my German's pretty good. I can get by and say most of what I want to in German. But even still, I struggle with really like lack of network and knowing how to find clients as a freelancer, as a foreign speaker. What's that process been like for you? And do you have any tips?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say that 95% of the work that I have gotten in Germany has just been through people I know, asking around or having friends who knew of somebody who was looking for something. So that's kind of how I've managed. I guess I've been really lucky in that regard. But also I would say with the jobs where I have applied blindly and to not be afraid of applying. Like a lot of people think, oh, there's absolutely no way that I would get this position. Or on LinkedIn, you see that there's over 100 applicants, but usually when they say over 100 applicants, it means people who clicked on the apply version but haven't necessarily gone through with the process. So that's how I got a freelance job, one of my most recent freelance jobs. And yeah, another time for another fellowship, I thought, oh, there will be too many applicants. But I always tell myself that if you don't apply, then there's a 0% chance that you'll get the opportunity. So, yeah, I guess this sounds cliche, but I think putting yourself out there always goes a long way.
Makes so much sense. I think that trust in yourself and in order to say, yeah, I can do this and I will make those connections and try and keep trying, right? Not giving up. And then also the network. I think that's so important. You're as strong as your network in terms of business. And so to be constantly, I guess, building relationships with people and connecting with others and talking about what you're doing, I guess that's
Yeah,
sounds important.
exactly. And I kind of find that the longer I've been here, the more organic that network starts to be. I mean, because you have so many contacts, and my last couple of assignments, I haven't even reached out to somebody, they've reached out to me. And that's been refreshing when things just kind of come your way.
Yeah, amazing. I think that's yeah, some time when time goes by and you start to build the experience and the reputation, then it starts to happen. Maybe I don't know if you'd give, what would you say people starting out on the freelance journey? What advice would you give them in terms of maybe the mindset or the way they need to think about it?
That's a really good question. I think just as hard as it is, as you were saying, don't give up. And I think as long as they can find one client, it doesn't matter how quote unquote small it is, just to go for that and to get their feet on the ground. And it's always easy to build once you have something to build on and have that solid foundation. So I would say that goes a long way. And also to learn German. I mean, even if you're living in a city like Berlin, where at least here in Mitte, it seems most cafe people don't even know any German, to just make an effort, because even reaching out to potential clients in German shows that you're really making an effort, and I think you stand out in comparison to other international applicants.
Yeah. Did that come naturally to you, or is that something that you had to push yourself to do?
Definitely something that I had to push myself to do. I mean, I have always enjoyed foreign languages, but German is a language that just kind of comes to you. Maybe like Spanish or some other languages, you really have to make a active effort. And so, when I was starting out, this was way, way before the days of, say, ChatGPT, where you can type in a text and say, does this sound polite? Is there a way that I could change it? I had a couple, well, I still do have a couple good German friends who would look over my text and offer suggestions. But what was important, I would never have them write anything for me or do anything for me. I would always make that first step myself, and then have them help me refine it. And that's kind of how I learned and got better. And I reached a point where I stopped asking them, probably to their relief, every time I wrote a small email.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Love it. There's that process of like, I can relate to this process, particularly with the language of like really feeling reliant on so many other people because I didn't have the skills yet. And then this kind of developing that sense of independence. And I do have like what it takes, I guess, to stand on my own feet and to do it more myself. I think it's a journey that everyone has to go on in that process of building life here.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Feeling like you're able to take those steps on your own, and it's really empowering when you do. I would always feel so good when I actually sent something. I remember at first it would take me sometimes an hour just to send a short email because I wouldn't feel confident in it or would be worried about the response. And it was always such a relief that I could send that off. So I think just taking baby steps is the first regard. I mean, even if I was asking to do an interview in English, the fact that I could write this email in German made me feel much more empowered.
I relate to that too. Okay, I we've got maybe 5 minutes left. I'm toying with two ideas. I'm wondering about your journalism and the kind of articles that you write. If you've got anything that you want to share or bring attention to for the audience, and then the second thing, maybe we have time for both, is any kind of final tips for people that are new to Germany and really wanting to have something tangible that they can do for themselves to help them in their journey to feeling like they're comfortable and that they have a life here.
Yeah, those are both really good questions. So the first one was about my journalism career, and it's really across the board. I'm losing my English idioms the longer that I'm here. But I think I've done a lot of on the ground reporting, everything from interviewing shopkeepers about the minimum wage, the story I talked about, asking expats who thought they were going to be here for a few weeks, how they ended up spending their lives here, to doing more analysis and commentary pieces. And I think you found me through the German Review, which is mostly analysis, but we've been opening it up to a lot of reporting. So I guess I wanted to draw attention to two stories which might be interesting to your listeners. One is an analysis piece where I wrote about how it would be a mistake to get rid of the fast track citizenship in Germany because there was the argument from the German government that that could cheapen the process of citizenship. But my argument was basically more power to anybody who is integrated enough in 3 years that they can apply for a German passport and feel like they're a part of the fabric of society, and that it's great that Germany has this option. And if anybody wants to go for it, then this is more empowering than quote unquote degrading citizenship. So I wrote that essay if anybody's interested. And then I did another interview with a restaurant owner and founder of a Israeli and Palestinian restaurant, which is probably one of the last places of its kind. And I thought this was really interesting because they take places and politics out of the food and really just have this cultural and culinary collaboration for anybody, not just from these two countries, but LGBTQ plus people and people of all different colors and sizes and opinions. And I just think that nowadays in such a polarized society, you really need to have more meeting and melting pots for people like this. So I really enjoyed doing this interview about the challenges he's faced, but also the reason why he finds hope.
Okay, welcome back, Rachel. Thanks for joining me again today. And I'm sorry that we got cut off at the end of the last conversation, but we're going to pick up again where we were and just share the last 10 minutes. And you were talking about a story about a restaurant owner.
It was a story about a restaurant owner and founder of Kanan in Berlin, which is a famous Israeli Palestinian restaurant, which has been around for the past 10 years. And before the conflict, they operated pretty apolitically. But then for understandable reasons, they have had a lot of clients who have decided not to eat there anymore. And it's basically a story about how in today's times it's getting more and more difficult to be apolitical and basically pro peace. And it's about their last push to stay in business. So I think it was kind of an inspiring story because the one of the co-founders was just talking about how he refuses to give up hope and what they're doing to hopefully keep going.
That's a really, I find it inspiring listening to that. I'm going to go and check out this article. I find it really interesting to know, somebody that's here and turning a business into something that feels meaningful and that I guess has a greater purpose behind it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Berlin seems to be a meeting place. I'm sure it's the same with Hamburg and a lot of German cities for different cultures that wouldn't necessarily come together where they're from, but in Germany they have found a way to meet up.
If people are also interested in reading these two articles now that you have shared, how do they find you?
So the website is called the German Review. I don't know if you're able to link to it, but it does a lot of commentary and analysis about current events that are especially relevant to foreigners here, or to internationals, I should say. And we're trying to do more interviews and reporting. So that comes out every Wednesday and Saturday.
Good to know. Yes, I can definitely link that the in the notes, or at least on the social media when we share the episode link, and on YouTube.
That'd be great.
So people can find it. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Is there, I guess, anything else that you would like to share with our listeners? Any parting words of advice, or I guess thinking back to maybe people that might be coming here and starting out their journey, what would you like to leave them with?
Yeah, well, I've been thinking about it since our last interview, actually, and I realized when I first got to Berlin, there was this feeling of excitement, like I was a tourist, which I guess I was, where even though everything was a challenge, it felt like a fun challenge because it was new. I was figuring out how things worked and everything was fresh. And sometimes now, after 13 years here, I can get really frustrated with how things are and they've become my normal. But sometimes I try to put on those fresh eyes and imagine like the first days of everything as different as it was, and just to sort of get re-energized to tackle new things again. Because if you think of it from the perspective of, oh, I have to do this and that and I'm so stressed and overwhelmed, which it's obviously okay to feel, then it can become a little bit hard to be living in a foreign country. But if you think of it as like, oh, this is a challenge that as somebody new I'm trying to navigate, then you, I guess, get more motivated. And also, I would say to make sure you always do something fun, like no matter how busy you are. I think in most German cities, there's, even smaller towns, there's meetups for internationals. If you don't have something directly in person, there's so many meetups online that you can turn to, so many events. And I would say it's always good to interject that into just getting settled, because you really do get the feel of excitement of being somewhere that's not necessarily always new, but that's always different.
I feel like that's such two good pieces of advice. I think I work as a coach, and I think one of the skills that I both use as a coach when I'm coaching others, but also if people ask advice around like how to think about life abroad, this idea of technical word beginner's mind, right? This idea of like really looking at things from a new perspective and trying to stay open and curious is a really valuable skill when things feel difficult. So I'm definitely with you on that. I love it.
Thanks. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. You just need to stay open the whole time and realize that even if things aren't working or don't feel like they're working out, that they will. Even if it's not in the way that you expect, you'll find a way to make it happen. I mean, part of living abroad in the first place is that things you don't know how things are going to go per se. So the more open you are, the more possibilities come your way.
Yeah, super positive way to end. Thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing your experience and your story and your advice and tips for people living here in Germany. It was really nice talking with you.
Really nice talking to you, and thanks a lot for having me on.
No worries. Catch up soon.
Talk to you soon.